Howdy, readers. I'm Jason, or Jason's Hand, and this is chapter and verse. So we're back for our first two-shelf tour in quite a while. I did not intend for it to take me this long to get back around to my shelves, but it has, and but now the wait is over. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So this is the fourth shelf on our second fiction bookcase. And the two books that I am going to discuss just real briefly on this two-shelf tour are Green Mansions by W.H. Hudson and Smilla's Sense of Snow by Peter Hoag. So we will start with the Hudson novel. Okay? So this is the Oxford World's Classics edition, which, to the best of my knowledge, is out of print now, unfortunately. But Green Mansions was published in the first decade of the 20th century. It was at a time when the friction, when the discord between the church and the revolutions in science that were being led by Charles Darwin and Charles Lyell were still fresh, and were still kind of tearing the intellectual community apart. This is a novel about a disillusioned man, revolutionary, who retreats to the jungles of South America, where he encounters a woman. Now, in really strange and subtle ways, this book proposes a kind of conciliatory sort of shared existence between the spirit of discovery and exploration and the principles and charitable vision of faith. It's a bit of a weird novel. It's dated, certainly, but it's well worth seeking out. I wrote a paper on it in graduate school. It was on this and Ian McEwan's novel Enduring Love. And it wasn't an entirely successful paper, but it was a good paper. It was provocative. And this is a cool novel. I've read it twice. I'll read it again in the future. So this is Green Mansions, W.H. Hudson. All right, our second novel, as stated, is, let's get a good picture of this here, right next to the spine of Les Mis. This is Smilla's Sense of Snow by Peter Hoag. It's an original hardcover of it, way back from when it was published, which I think was in the 90s. There's recently been, here in the States, a beautiful trade paperback, I think anniversary reissue of it. That's a gorgeous cover. It's an absolutely gorgeous cover. If any of you are readers who like to read kind of seasonally, right? So I do this. I like the books I read in the summertime to feel like summertime books, right? To feel like hot weather novels. And in the winter, I really like to read things that feel cold and blustery, right? Like I love reading Dickens in the wintertime, and it's not just because he published A Christmas Carol. This novel, it's a Danish novel. This is maybe the quintessential winter read, all right? Smilla's Sense of Snow. It tells the story of an unusual protagonist investigating the death of a little boy she loved who lived in her apartment building. The protagonist is named Smilla Jasperson. She is a glaciologist, so she is an ice scientist. She knows everything under the sun about snow and ice. She is steely. She is ice cold herself in many ways, and she is a freaking pit bull. When she gets it into her head that there's foul play behind the death of this boy, she does not let it go. I would bet money that Smilla Jasperson was the prototype for Lisbeth Salander. So if you love Lisbeth Salander, if you love the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo novels, you need to read this book because Smilla was Lisbeth Salander before there was Lisbeth Salander. And the last thing I'll mention about this, let me just confirm here real quick. I haven't read this in donkey's years. So the novel was, yes, there we are. Let's see if we can see that. The novel was translated by Tina Nunnally, who was the translator of Kristen Lavransdatter, which I mentioned in my BookTube Top 10s tag, and is one of my favorite books of all time. She is a remarkable, just an absolutely remarkable translator. And I know this not because I can read and speak the Scandinavian languages that she translates from, but because the English translations themselves are just, God, they're elegant and they're fluid and they're lucid. They're absolutely wonderful. Strangely, Peter Hoag, if memory serves, said in an interview at some point in the now distant past that he didn't like this translation of the book. So he's a better writer than he is judge of translations, to my mind. But anyway, this is a great book, Smilla's Sense of Snow. So now we've moved down to the fifth shelf, the fifth and final shelf on our second fiction bookcase. And the two books that I'm going to be talking to you about from this shelf are the novel Adam Resurrected by Yoram Kaniuk, and actually the memoir A Girl Named Zippy by Haven Kimmel. So, Adam Resurrected, it's over here. You can not really see it. Andersonville is kind of the first book you can see there. But over to the left of Andersonville, we've got Adam Resurrected, now in November, Waiting by Ha Jin, Poet and Dancer, and Out of India by Ruth Prowse-Javala, and Ark Baby by Liz Jensen. So, but here is Adam Resurrected. Okay, let's see if I can get a good view of it here. Yeah, that's all right, I suppose. So this is a book that we read some years ago in Shade Tree. Kaniuk was an Israeli writer. He passed away just a few years back. And this is a novel that explores the horror of the Holocaust by kind of setting it on a collision course with the absurd. And by absurd, I mean absurd with a capital A. The main character in the book is a kind of holy fool. He's a clown. And during the Holocaust, he is given an unimaginable task that can only, frankly, lead to madness. The events of the novel that take place in the wake of the Holocaust take place in a kind of asylum. You might think of the book as kind of Schindler's List meets One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or Schindler's List meets Merat Saad, if any of you are familiar with Merat Saad. This is a dark novel. It's evocative. It's nightmarish. It's ridiculous, even at times kind of wickedly funny, and it's just absolutely devastating, too. It was made into a film a handful of years back. I think it was directed by Paul Schrader, who was the screenwriter on The Last Temptation of Christ, which is a film I love, based on a novel that I love. The film of Adam Resurrected was good. It wasn't extraordinary or anything. It was nowhere near as successful as the novel is. It starred Jeff Goldblum as the main character, but yeah, this is a book that is far less known than it deserves to be. Now, switching gears to nonfiction, and you might be wondering, why has Jason got nonfiction mixed in with his fiction? Well, so what I do is, if I tend to think of the writer primarily as a writer of fiction, then I keep their nonfiction with their fiction. So I do this for Haven Kimmel, who wrote this book, I do this for Peter Matheson, Ron Hansen, Howard Jacobson. So that's why we're going to be looking at a memoir mixed in with the fiction. And this is a girl named Zippy, growing up small in Moreland, Indiana. And this is by my friend Haven Kimmel, and it's a kind of memoir in vignettes of her childhood. She is the title character. She is Zippy, and when you meet her, when you get to know her, even though she's a grown woman now with children and grandchildren of her own, it's very easy to see how she was Zippy. I read this. God, it's been a while. It's been a good, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 years since I read this. It's freaking hilarious. I mean, it's absolutely just, there are passages in this that are, well, there's one passage in particular that I won't read to you, because it's on some levels, it's a little bit wrong as well, but it's one of the funniest things I've ever read. Years ago, mine and Kelly's pastor, long before she was our pastor, long before, I think even before she lived here in Casper, she read this book, and I think she woke her roommate up. I think is what it was, with just howling laughter. Maybe it was her husband. Maybe she was married to Dan by then. I'm not sure. But just howling with laughter. And she regards this book, I think, as the funniest book that she's ever read. And it's certainly one of the funniest books I've ever read. If somebody said, make a list right now of the 5 funniest books you've ever read, fiction or nonfiction, this would be on the list. And it's not just funny. Like any good memoir, it's balanced and it's rounded. And it gives us a portrait of a childhood that feels, here, I'm going to see if we can, see a little bit better. There we go. It gives us a portrait of childhood that is, I mean, of course there's hilarity in there, but there's also moments or scenes in the book that are tremendously moving and really communicate the kind of mystery and confusion of childhood. It's a brilliant book. The last chapter of this, or the last vignette of this, had my wife Kelly in tears. So, to my mind, this is one of the best portraits of an American childhood ever published. It's a book that everybody needs to read, especially if you grew up in small town America or small town England or small town anywhere. You'll find much in this memoir that you recognize about your own childhood, I'm sure. And Haven Kimmel is one of the nicest people who has ever walked the face of the earth. So if you were to buy her book, you would be helping to support somebody who is brilliant and kind and generous and funny and just lovely. So that is A Girl Named Zippy. There it is, the most recent 2-shelf tour, and I will see you guys soon. And you'll see me soon, because you didn't really see me tonight. So until then, adios.